The ROI of New Donor Acquisition 101. Nonprofits routinely invest too little in new donor acquisition because donor development is often reported as an administrative or overhead expense. Nonprofits are pressured to limit the funds they allocate for acquiring new donors. And when overall funding becomes tight, it's often the first area targeted for cuts. Without a clear understanding of both the costs and the return on those costs in terms of new funds brought in, organizations can find themselves stuck in a cycle that not only prevents growth, but makes it harder and harder to even maintain existing programs and services. ROI analysis provides nonprofit executives and their boards with a rigorous framework for developing a new donor acquisition program. In turn, higher investments in new donor acquisition can be made with greater confidence and fewer risks, so that the funding will be made available for expanding and enriching programs and services. Understanding and being able to clearly demonstrate the return on investment, or ROI, that your organization is achieving with its development spending is critical. If your ROI is negative, then your organization is losing money with its development spending, and it's critically important that you develop a new plan. If your ROI is positive, it provides a strong justification for continued, if not increased, development spending. If you don't know what your development ROI is, then you need to figure it out quickly. You don't need an MBA or an accounting degree to figure out your nonprofit ROI on new donor acquisition. You simply need to calculate two key numbers. The first is called DLV and stands for Donor Lifetime Value. This is the amount that a donor can be expected to give during their entire relationship with your nonprofit. DLV begins with the very first donation and includes any and every donation from then on, whether it comes in year 2, 3, or beyond. The second is CPDA and stands for Cost Per Donor Acquisition. This is the amount that your organization spends in order to bring in a new donor. Wouldn't it be great if every investment you made in donor acquisition paid back immediately? That would be like hitting the grand slam home run in baseball. Grand slams happen infrequently and are not predictable. Most baseball games are won with a series of predictable singles and doubles that move players around the bases inning after inning. Fundraising is a lot like baseball. It's great when a new donor acquisition campaign delivers big returns quickly, but that's not something you can depend on. Instead, you want to get a lot of donors to give the first time, even if they're giving small amounts. Then you can move them to double and triple the amount of their initial gifts as their commitment to your mission and your organization strengthens. At the heart of ROI analysis is the concept of the lifetime value of a new donor relationship. DLV recognizes that first donations will not typically cover the outreach costs of getting these gifts. DLV thinking moves the focus beyond the single at-bat or even game and onto the entire season. It's no longer just about the donor's initial gift, but instead about all the future gifts they're likely to give over their entire relationship with you. You can calculate DLV by analyzing the giving history of your current donors. Start by determining the average annual give per donor. Do this by dividing a total annual gift amount of all donors by the total number of donors in that year. Use some judgment in what numbers you use here. For example, if in the past year your nonprofit received an unusually large gift from a single donor, you may want to exclude that donation so it doesn't throw off the average. Next, assess donor attrition, or the likelihood that a donor will not continue to give. Do this by taking the number of people who gave last year and who do not give this year and divide this by the total number of people who gave. This is known as the donor attrition rate. Here's an example for calculating your donor attrition rate. You had 1,000 donors this year, but 400 donors from last year did not give. Your donor attrition rate is 400 divided by 1,000, or 0.4. Now you can make a quick calculation of the lifetime value. Let's say your average annual give is $100. You determine that the donor attrition rate is 0.4. Calculate DLV by dividing your average annual give per donor by the attrition rate. So, $100 divided by 0.4 equals $250. This is the average amount of giving you project that a new donor will give over the course of their relationship with you. While some people will give less and some will give a lot more, this is the average you will use to determine return on investment. But ROI isn't just based on the amount of money you get from donors. You also need to factor in the amount you invested to attract them in the first place. These costs include the direct outreach or direct marketing expenses, like online search advertising or direct mail printing, material, and postage fees. Be selective when incorporating certain costs like graphics, writing, or programmer expenses. Because your organization may be able to find additional uses for these assets in other campaigns, these are investments that often have ongoing value. Including all of these costs in your launch campaign won't provide a true picture of your cost for acquiring new donors. Just like you worked out the average amount you expect to receive for each donor for your DLV, you need to do the same with your outreach costs. Do this by taking your total outreach costs and dividing it by the number of new donors you attracted through this outreach effort. This gives you what is known as the cost per donor acquisition, or CPDA. For instance, if you spent $2,400 on direct mail or outreach and obtained 40 new donors, the CPDA is $60. Now you have what you need to calculate the ROI of your efforts to acquire new donors. ROI isn't complicated. It's nothing more than dividing the amount you expect to get from a donor by the amount you spent to get them to give. To get your return on investment, take your donor lifetime value and divide it by your cost per donor acquisition. As a formula, it looks like this: DLV divided by CPDA equals ROI. Now imagine you've just run a new donor campaign and have been asked to report to the board on the results. After reviewing the campaign itself, you're asked how much these first-time donors actually gave. You can tell them that the current total raised is $1,000. The board treasurer begins to suggest that the expenditures may not have been worthwhile. She notes that the campaign cost $2,400 and did not even make back half of what was spent. She's ready to propose that the campaign should not be repeated. But because you did your DLV analysis, you were ready for her objection. With an average donor lifetime value of $250, the 40 new donors from the campaign can be expected to contribute a total of $10,000 to your organization over the coming years. That would be a $7,500 gain on the investment. But this is more than simply justifying to the board what you've already done. It's about being able to make a case for them to approve another, even larger investment in attracting new donors. That is where your ROI analysis comes in. You explain that if your next campaign has the same CPDA of $60 and the same DLV of $250, then a budget of $5,000 will raise about $20,000 from 80 new donors. That's a projected ROI of $15,000. Not only is that a strong justification for new investment, it also will provide you and your board clear targets and goals to guide the campaign and future decision-making. But what if you or your board believe that there simply isn't any money in your budget for a new donor campaign? Again, it's a lot like saving for your retirement. Getting started right now, even with just a small amount, will provide significant long-term returns. The key is to get started and to remember that some investment is infinitely better than none. The only way to grow your future budget and ensure long-term sustainability for your organization is by making investments in new donor acquisition right now in the present. ROI analysis can also be a powerful tool in going directly to big donors and asking them to support your new donor outreach. These wealthy donors are often comfortable with the type of ROI analysis you're presenting them because they already use it to manage their own investments. They're also very interested in ways their money can make an important impact. With ROI analysis, you can clearly show them how their gift will create multiple new donors and significant new donations for your organization. This can be a powerful incentive for them to provide a large gift for you to kickstart your new donor acquisition efforts. Nonprofits often underfund their new donor acquisition efforts. There are a number of reasons, but the result is that organizations find themselves stuck in a cycle that not only prevents growth, but it makes it harder and harder to even maintain programs and services. By using ROI analysis, your nonprofit can break this cycle. You can understand donor acquisition in terms of dollars and cents returns. A long-term plan that works can be developed, easily explained to your board, and then implemented. Remember that ROI is all about donor lifetime value, or DLV, and that you determine DLV by dividing the average amount a donor gives over their total relationship with your organization with your donor attrition number, or how many donors you lose each year. Then you compare that against your CPA, or cost per donor acquisition, and you have your donor ROI.